Lately, I've been getting a lot of questions from people trying to tame their type 1, asking me about ketones, asking me about ketosis versus ketoacidosis, and I believe it's about time we dissuade some rumors. Ketones have been sort of given a boogeyman kind of status within the diabetic community because ketones are associated with ketoacidosis, and obviously ketoacidosis is bad. But ketones themselves are actually fairly good in the right context, that context being nutritional ketosis. Now, don't be alarmed by that word ketosis because ketosis is actually completely different than ketoacidosis. It is completely safe, natural, and even common for people that aren't even diabetic. What happens when you go low carb is that your body starts using fat for fuel, and one of the results of burning fat for fuel is ketones. Ketones are needed to power parts of your body that do not rely on fat for fuel and instead need an alternative fuel source when sugar is not available. Your brain, your red blood cells are good examples of this. They can use ketones rather than sugar when it's not available, and it actually works as a very clean burning fuel compared to sugar. It has less oxidative stress, and unlike sugar, your brain doesn't need insulin in order to use ketones. So for stuff like seizures, for stuff like Alzheimer's, where your brain is resistant to insulin, ketones are actually very therapeutic and very useful. So ketones aren't a bad thing. They're actually very important on a low carb approach. They're essential even. The difference between ketosis and ketoacidosis is that ketosis, your range for ketones is between 0.5 moles to about 3, maybe at the most. Whereas ketoacidosis is typically above 10. So big difference there between ketosis and ketoacidosis. And even when you're in a fasted state for a long period of time, you're only going to be about 5 or 6 max. It's like comparing a light rain to a hurricane. Sure, both have water falling out of the sky, but one is great for the environment, and another is going to tear your house apart and cause endless amounts of damage. Now, at first, when you try a ketogenic low-carb approach, you're likely to be peeing out a lot of ketones. That might seem scary at first, but that's not because of ketoacidosis. That's really because your body's making ketones, it's starting to burn fat for fuel, but it's also not yet adapted to using those ketones. You need to give your body time to adapt to using those ketones. And once it does, you'll see the amount of ketones in your pee and in your blood go down. And that doesn't mean your body's not making ketones. It's still making ketones to use as fuel for your brain and your red blood cells, but it actually means that's actually using it. Obviously, if there's less in the blood, that means there's more being used by the tissues themselves, and that's a good thing. You want your body to be using those ketones, because those ketones, again, burn cleaner and cause less oxidative stress compared to sugar. So seriously, don't be worried about ketones. They're actually a good thing, and they're actually very important to be having on a low-carb approach. That doesn't mean you need to be testing for ketones and seeing if you're getting them, because ketones aren't the goal with diabetes. The goal for a low-carb approach in managing diabetes is to have normal blood sugars. Ketones are just a bonus. Now, you can test them if you want to be really sure, but you don't have to. There's no need. The only kind of test you should be taking is your A1C, your blood sugar, lipid panels, and so on. Ketones really don't play a part here. They can act as a feel-good measure if you really want to be sure, but they're not that important as far as your management goes. Your most important thing is your blood sugar. Another difference between ketosis and ketoacidosis is typically when you're on a low-carb approach and you're doing it right, your blood sugar is going to be at a fairly normal range. Whereas with ketoacidosis, not only is your blood sugar sky high, above 240 milligrams per deciliter, but also you're not getting enough insulin. So if you start a low-carb approach, but you're not bolusing for protein, you're not changing your insulin regimen to fit your new insulin needs, you might have some problems, obviously. And People generally do if they don't know what they're doing in a low-carb approach. But if you know what you're doing, if you're doing the low-carb approach correctly, if you're following the guidelines laid out in Dr. Bernstein's book and on these videos, then you're not going to have an issue. Ketoacidosis is not going to be a concern for you. Now, it is true that euglycemic ketoacidosis, aka ketoacidosis at normal blood sugar ranges, does happen. But this doesn't happen because of low carb. This happens because you get very sick, you get very dehydrated. And that happens plenty often on a non-low carb, on a standard diet, as compared to a low carb diet. So don't worry, low carb isn't going to cause you to have ketoacidosis. If anything, high blood sugar and not enough insulin, especially on a standard diet, could cause ketoacidosis. Now, if you're on a standard diet right now and you have high ketones, that's cause for concern. But if you're on a low carb diet, if you have moderate levels of ketones in the bloodstream or in your urine, not a big deal. Don't worry so much about it. That's natural, and that happens to non-diabetics as well as diabetics. In fact, babies are in a state of ketosis when they're born and throughout their breastfeeding. They're not eating tons of carbs. They're drinking breast milk, which is full of fat that is fueling their body, causing ketones to power the brain and help them grow. It's actually very important for growth and development for babies. If babies can handle ketones, I think you can too. So one more time, don't worry so much about ketones. They're healthy for you, they're safe, they're a great source of energy, and they come part and parcel with a low-carb diet. And they're not the bad guy that doctors might make him out to be. Just because they come with ketoacidosis doesn't mean they can't be a good thing in the context of ketosis, in the context of a low-carb diet, in the context of normal blood sugar. In fact, most of the time, they actually are. So keep that in mind. Don't be afraid of ketones. Don't be afraid of ketosis. It's the good guy. It's what you want. Keep that in mind as you tame type 1. Keep that in mind as you use low carb to find normal blood sugars. And if you like this video, if you like what I'm talking about here with ketones and everything else, be sure to subscribe, be sure to like the page, like the video, share it around with all your friends, and that way you can help more and more people tame their type 1s with a low carb approach.